Hello and welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife, and I cannot wait to share the conversation I had with a veteran fighter pilot with you this week. We discussed his combat missions in the Middle East, as well as going extravehicular in the Caribbean. So without further ado, let's buckle up and join me on this week's episode. I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. Okay, so Bill Welsh, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. We're just kind of get started with, will you introduce yourself generally and explain when you joined the military and why?
Okay, my name's Bill Welch. I grew up in Miami, Florida. I went to military school for high school in Indiana, a boarding school. And after military school, I didn't do any military in college at all. When I got out of college, I started looking for a job, and there were no jobs to be had at the time because the economy was down, and I'd always been interested in aircraft, and the Navy was had a big uh, advertising push for naval aviation at the time, and I had worn out the A encyclopedia as a kid looking at airplanes, so I decided to give that a try. And so I ended up in a program that's no longer in existence called Aviation Officer Candidate School. And unlike the Navy's regular officer candidate school, it was run by the Marine Corps or by Marine drill instructors. It was run by the Navy, but it used Marine drill instructors. So it was a very intense program. And as our drill instructors put it, attrition was their mission because anybody could drop out of the program at any time. And they tried to push us hard so that anybody that wasn't up to the challenge would drop on their own. So it was a good program. And 90 days later, they commissioned us officers and sent us into flight training.
What
So it
year
was
was
very
this?
good. This was in 1978. AOCS ran from, I think, after World War II, but it was discontinued in, I believe, the mid 90s.
Yeah,
So,
I'm like, I've never heard of that program before. So yeah. So once you got commissioned, 90 days, that's pretty fast. So
yeah.
now you're a commissioned officer, you're a pilot. What happens next?
The next thing is, and it differed at the time. My eyes were not 2020; they were 2025, and I couldn't get a waiver. So I ended up becoming went into the pipeline for a naval flight officer, which is like a navigator in the Air Force, kind of similar to that. But I wanted to be in carrier aviation, and the F-14 was the big airplane for the Navy there, the big push or most prestigious. So I wanted to go to that. And so I started, you know, through flight training to do that. And they have basic naval flight officer training. And so I went to that. And from there, they feed all the Navy's aircraft that have flight officers in them, from F-14s, A-6 attack aircraft, EA-6 jamming aircraft, but also P-3s, C-130s, and other aircraft like that. And it was kind of interesting when I had graduated from that program to go to the advanced. There were no F-14 quotas. There were no fighter quotas at all. And the one of the rules they had in the Navy is if you graduate first in your class, you'll get your first choice. So they'll do whatever they can to make that happen. And in my class, there were two guys, I was number three, there were two guys ahead of me. And because of people dropping out, they pushed those two guys ahead of me. And so they graduated 2 weeks before I did. When I graduated by, I think it was 300ths of a point, I was number one. And there were no fighter slots, but the CO of the squadron said, okay, the first guy gets his choice. We're going to stash you uh, in a make work type job for 2 weeks until the next RIO class starts. And that was the specialty I was going for, RIO or radar intercept officer. And so I
Mm,
just stroke of luck there for me.
that's cool though. Like, so did you eventually get to fly? Were you able to eventually get a waiver?
No, no, and they didn't. The Navy is much harder. If I'd gone to the Air Force, I most likely would have gotten a waiver. I was still a naval flight officer. I just wasn't
Yeah.
driving the airplane. I was,
Yeah, you still got to go up.
yeah,
Okay, so you got in, but you were in post Vietnam.
right.
How long were you in? Were you in for Desert Storm? What was going on while you were in?
Okay, first off, I went through after training in Pensacola. I got my wings and I went to Miramar, Naval Air Station Miramar in San Diego, and did F-14 training. Um, I was in the first class where they had a reconnaissance mission, and not everybody went through that. I was the first non low experience guy or non fleet trained aviator to go through that. And so I ended up in an East Coast squadron, which was kind of usually if you go to the West Coast, you stay there. I went to the East Coast from the West Coast squadron, training squadron. And then I was assigned to Fighter Squadron 143. They had a colorful name, the world famous Puking Dogs. You might have heard of them. And so anyway, that was the squadron I went to. I did the fighter and reconnaissance mission there, and we were assigned to Carrier Air Wing 7, which was assigned to the USS Eisenhower. So I did two cruises on on the Eisenhower in 3 years, and the cruises are they start at 6 months and then depending on world affairs they'll go longer. And also you just don't go out for a 6 month cruise. You have workups where you'll go out for 2 weeks, go out for a month. And then we had my first cruise, we had a 6 week NATO cruise uh, assigned to us as well, where we were operating above the Arctic Circle in the North Sea. And that was really challenging uh, because of the high sea states. You know, the flight deck of the Eisenhower is 70 feet above the water. And we'd have times where there were waves coming over the top. But
That'd have been pretty interesting. Like not many people
yeah,
did you get to like fly up in the Arctic Circle and all like that's just what you
yeah,
guys were doing? Wow. Yeah, not many
yeah.
people have flown, at least I've not met too many people who've
Well, I
flown as
mean,
a fighter pilot up there.
the the there's not much different to it. It's just that if you have to bail out, then you're going into a very low survivable situation. We were wearing
Yeah.
exposure suits and everything, but they
But
would
even with
just,
that, you wouldn't have more than a few minutes probably.
maybe a half hour.
This is all during Cold War stuff.
Yeah.
And what was the mindset? Like, there was not an active hotspot currently. This was in between. Did you have any run-ins with the Russians? Did you have any?
All the time, quite frequently when we were on cruise. A lot of cat and mouse type games. We um, we would join up on Soviet bombers all the time. They'd always come out to where the air group was, or the carrier, to try to surveil that. And kind of one of our unwritten rules was to try to make sure if there was never a picture of a Soviet aircraft with the carrier without a Navy aircraft with it. So that
So that they always knew that you had them covered.
right. And so
Yeah.
they but we kept track of all their ships in the Mediterranean, as I'm sure they kept track of us. We always had um, an intelligence ship, like a little trawler that would follow us and keep tabs on the air group, and just monitor flight operations and everything else and try to gather intelligence on us. So they were always out there. But we did a lot of things. I remember we had one admiral that was Jerry O. Tuttle. Uh, somebody called him Admiral Woody Hayes because he was, aggressive like the Ohio State football coach was. But I remember one time he planned an anti-ship strike and used U.S. Navy ships as a target. And there were no live ordnance. Well, we had live ordnance, but not live bombs to drop. And he had those Navy ships steam to where the Soviet ships were. And then we had like a 20 aircraft strike on those ships that were close to the Soviet ships. So the Soviets, he did it to scare them, basically.
Oh,
So we have all these aircraft coming in close to where they were.
oh
So it's just a
man.
lot of things like that. It was just
Dang.
interesting.
That's
The
gutsy.
Yeah, my second cruise was a little bit different. The it was in My first cruise was in 1981. My second cruise was in 1983,
Mhm.
predominantly. And my second cruise in, I believe it was September of '83, the Marines got bombed in Beirut International.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, 280 Marines, I think, died in that. And so, right after that, we got uh, tasked to do reconnaissance over Lebanon. And so I
Where were you
went,
guys? uh, you were on a carrier during that time?
yeah, yeah,
So you were in the med?
yeah, we were in the Med.
Okay. Wow.
So we had like lines to cross. You could
Yeah.
not go over the beach, is what we call it, or go feet dry over Lebanon without authorization.
Yeah.
And plus, we also were uh, had to work around the Israelis because they were always doing bombing raids into Lebanon.
Did things get interesting or sketchy? Did you have any run-ins?
A little bit. We knew we were taking small arms fire, nothing big. We did have a couple missile launches. I had a
Like people shoot at you?
SA-7. Yeah, I had an
Oh wow.
SA-7 shot at the aircraft I was in, which is it's like the handheld
Mm-hmm.
surface to air missile. But the way we were going we stayed a little bit higher than normal, and we were fast. So there was no way that missile could have gotten to us. I did 4 missions over Lebanon, and all our missions over Lebanon were retroactively labeled combat missions after we had completed operations. And ironically, our admin department put in the people that had missions over Lebanon for air medals, and they submitted it to the wrong chain of command, and we never got awarded. So I should have an air medal, but I never got
That definitely sounds like military paperwork.
it. Yeah,
Yep, straight up. Maybe you'll get it, 20
yeah,
years from now, someone will find the paperwork and
yeah.
process it.
I'm not
Oh,
counting on it. I was going to say that was pretty the highlights of it, but the last mission I did over Lebanon, the one interesting thing we did is it was kind of no rules. So um, I was in the second airplane, but the flight lead, we went with him, and we flew to the Beirut International, and we boomed the tower at a supersonic with 2 airplanes. So it
I
was,
bet that sent a message.
yeah. And it's like I was telling somebody, I said, one of these days I'm going to run into a Marine that was down there when that happened. And I can say, yeah, that was me. I was one of those guys, but so far it hadn't happened.
So, wait, was that whose idea was it to do that?
Uh, the flight lead, I think and I can't remember who it was, but he just said we're going to do this, and we did.
Of course,
And
why not?
it's better to beg forgiveness and ask permission. So,
Oh, heck yeah, there are definitely times. Yep. Oh gosh, that's funny. So you did those two tours, you did the whole thing over Lebanon where it got interesting. Um, did it calm down after that?
well, we came to the end of our cruise. Our cruise was supposed to be, I think, 6.5 months, and we kept getting extended 1 week at a time. So it was 7.5 months by the time we came home. Um, but it's while that part is kind of dangerous, is flying around a ship is dangerous.
Yeah.
Um, the operations are really intense, and the thing about carrier aviations is you may touch down on the deck, but you won't necessarily stop. If your hook doesn't grab a wire, you go around, and you have
Yeah.
a and because they're hanging ordnance on the aircraft, if they put a 500-pound missile on your aircraft, that's 500 pounds of fuel you don't have to bring back aboard the ship because you have a max landing weight. And so there were several times where we were low on gas and had to go find a tanker and tank and get fuel to try to land again. And that
Oh,
was and at nighttime. It's very can be very scary.
yeah. That would midair fueling at night. That's got to be interesting.
Yeah, it's a
Yikes.
little, but
So because I know they've got the lines and the hook is supposed to catch the line. I in the movies and stuff. Okay, my uncle would have probably been able to answer this for me. My uncle worked on carriers and he was a F-14 mechanic.
okay,
Isn't there like a net or something, or do they only use that for like extreme emergencies to catch you?
only for emergencies.
Okay, so otherwise it's like try again.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh wow.
basically, and that's called a barricade.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Oh yeah, because rig the barricade.
they're
Okay,
always
yes.
called
See?
arrested landings, but they call it a barricade arrested landing. but it tends
Okay.
to rip things off the side of the airplane like
And
probes.
you never had to do any of those.
No, no, I did um, on one of my workups for that last med cruise. Uh, I had a midair collision and had to eject.
You had to eject.
Yeah, yeah.
Where were you when that happened? Where was that
We were
stateside?
in the Mediterranean. I'm not the Mediterranean, the Caribbean. We were
Okay.
down. It was in March of '83, and we were off of Puerto Rico. And
And it was you and your plane and another American plane collided.
yeah, another F-14.
And were you guys in this? You guys were practicing together or like working together?
No, no, we weren't. They were on a separate. It was a nighttime mission, so we went out as singles, so not working with anyone else. And we had completed our mission, and we were flying back to the ship. And they, I don't know what they were going to do, but we were we had a return to force profile, so we were at 15,000 feet, uh, doing 250 knots, and they started the intercept at 450 knots and came around behind us and hit us. And we don't know what happened or what was the plan was.
What the thought
We,
process was?
yeah,
So
and
you ejected, you had to, did you end up in the Caribbean, like in the ocean?
yeah,
You
yeah.
ditched in the ocean.
It's
So what was
my
that like? What did that feel like having to like the sensation and ending up in the ocean and the whole process of getting picked up and everything?
well, it's amazing the training because it just becomes automatic. Um, our first rule is if you're out of control below 10,000 feet, then you eject. And we met that. We were dropping uh, fairly quickly. So I saw 7,500 feet and I got both of us out of there. So I had the command eject. And
Oh my.
then you come out and you've got several things to do, make sure you have a good shoot and release your raft, make sure your life vest is inflated, and just several little procedure things. And then you get in the water and you got to get rid of your chute or it can kill you because
Yeah.
it becomes a sea anchor. It'll basically open up below you. But there's been technology that's increased the safety. So now when you hit the water, if you hit seawater, it automatically releases your parachute and automatically inflates your life vest. So if you're
But that
unconscious,
wasn't a thing for you. You had to do that yourself.
yeah,
So you hit the water, you ditch all that. You guys had a raft that inflated, I'm guessing.
yeah,
So you climb into
it,
the raft and you just wait for people to come get you?
yeah. Well, you get on the radio. It was the raft only inflated halfway for me, so I got in it, and it was about 4 foot seas at the time, and about every 10th wave was a breaker. That would,
Oh,
um,
so you were soaked.
yeah. And so I said, well, if I'm still here in the morning when it's light, I'll get out and blow up the raft the rest of the way. Well, luckily, they it was interesting. The other aircraft they had an idea that it was had gone down before us, and so we got on our handheld radios and basically got somebody overhead, and so and then we got were in the water probably for about 2 or 3 hours and got picked up by a helo
Oh,
from the
wow.
Eisenhower. So it took the helo a while to get there because we were 100 miles away from the ship. So there was nothing out there, no other ships, no anything.
Thank
Just,
goodness there were no sharks.
well, there could have been, but that's why it kept me at my raft.
You stayed in the raft and you couldn't see, so it's all good.
Right.
Oh my goodness. That's LA. It was the Caribbean, so it's warm water.
Well, it was 75 degrees, which isn't
Yeah,
so
that's
bad
not warm.
for about 10 or 20 minutes, but after a couple hours, it started,
Getting
shivering.
cold.
Yeah.
Oh man. So when they get you, like, they have to like check you out for like hypothermia or any of that sort of stuff? Or did you pretty much bounce back just fine?
And we bounced back. Both of us did. Unfortunately, the other crew didn't make it. So that was the bad part of
So
the,
that's why you guys don't ever know what happened, is because they didn't make it.
right, right.
Oh my goodness.
So we made it back to the ship, and uh, the Navy has a 72-hour grounding
Hmm.
post ejection for observation. And so when that 72nd hour was up, I was back on the flight schedule at night. And that was very interesting just to get back into an airplane. And the problem we had is they don't have a lot of extra supplies in the for flight gear on the carrier. So our parachute riggers had to go out to the other ready rooms and the other squadrons to try to get G suits
Parachute
and torso harnesses and those sort of things. So
to replace all
that's
your gear.
yeah.
What was that mentally like getting back into the plane after that happened?
It wasn't. I was fine with it, and uh, it was kind of just a little wary taking the first catapult shot after that at night, but once we got airborne, it was fine.
When did you find out that the other crew hadn't made it?
Um, we found out basically the helo that picked us up found one of the other guys, and he had never got rid of his parachute, and so he drowned. And the and he was the RIO, and the pilot of that aircraft was never found. So we had no idea what happened to them or the airplane or anything else.
Do you know where they were stationed? Were they stationed out of Puerto Rico or something like that? Or
No, no, they were on board Eisenhower with us.
oh,
They were in our sister squadron. We had two F-14 squadrons aboard ship.
did you know them?
They were both brand new to the squadron, and I had met the pilot. He was a very nice guy. He was very experienced. He was a lieutenant commander, which is the same as a major, and so he was very well respected pilot. And the backseater was an ensign, usually which is like an O1, like a second lieutenant. And so he got through training very quick. In fact, he was the RIO of the year at the training squadron. So he was a very sharp guy too. So, you
So
just
yeah,
don't know what
that's
happened.
wow. And this is probably before black boxes were a real thing. Like, they didn't have a lot of recording stuff, or did you just never
No, they
find
didn't
out?
have any. They just get the radar data from the E2 and from the ships that are that might have been tracking the aircraft. So there was no black boxes, and both aircraft went into about 5,000 feet of water. So there's no recovering them. The
Yeah.
Navy won't spend the money.
No, that makes sense. Dang. It was, I was about to joke when you said it was the Caribbean that, it wasn't the Bermuda Triangle or anything, was it? But
No.
over by Puerto Rico, you can't claim that. Oh, that's unfortunate though that you lost those guys, and that was
Yeah.
especially with them both being so talented. It just shows that accidents can happen at any time for any reason. I mean, life happens, and
No, never know when God's going to recall you. So,
that's true. It's true. And yeah, I can imagine it would be a little hesitant to climb back in, especially after that. And it's amazing that got you back on the roster so quick. But I mean, if you guys were prepping to go out to the Med because of everything going on, I can imagine that there was readiness issues, and they're like,
yeah.
operational readiness was what was important. So thank you so much for your service. And is there anything else you want to leave with everyone? Any nuggets of wisdom, any piece of advice?
No, there's nothing I can think of. Just do your best in everything else, and that gives the Lord an opportunity to use you where He needs you. So options and opportunities. So do the best you can, and you will get more options and opportunities for the Lord to
Yep.
put you where He needs you.
I just want to say one more time how grateful I am for Bill Walsh being willing to come and share his experience with us on the podcast today. If you want to hear more stories from veterans like this one, please like, share, subscribe, click it, stick it to the algorithm so we can break through those barriers and get these stories out to as many people as possible. If you are a veteran or a military spouse or affiliated with the military, or do something that is affiliated to the military and would like to be on the podcast, please contact me through the podcast information below. I would love to hear from you and see what you have so that we can get your story out to everyone as well. It doesn't matter if you're a member of the military community or just somebody who is supportive of the military community. It is wonderful that you're here, and I am grateful for your support and encouragement. Please continue to share these stories. Let's build a community of encouragement and support for everybody who has served this country, past, present, and future. And as always, let's be the good we want to see in the world. I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you've been listening to Life of a Military Wife.